In a quiet town surrounded by lush green hills and thick forests, there lived a remarkable woman named Lieutenant Sarah Callahan. She wasn't like most people in the town. Her life had been shaped by years of discipline, courage, and an unbreakable bond with animals, specifically dogs. Sarah was no ordinary dog lover. She was one of the finest K-9 handlers in the military, known for training some of the most skilled working dogs in the world. These weren't just any dogs. They were fearless, intelligent, and capable of performing tasks that saved lives on dangerous missions. After serving her country for over a decade, Sarah decided to return to her hometown to take care of her aging father. Though she had left active duty, her passion for training dogs never faded. Instead of working with soldiers, she now focused on training rescue dogs and security animals. Her two closest companions were Titan, a powerful German shepherd with piercing eyes, and Luna, a sleek Belgian Malinois with lightning-fast reflexes. Together, they formed a team that was as unstoppable as it was loyal. Every day, Sarah took Titan and Luna out for long runs through the forest trails near her home. It was during these moments that she felt truly alive. The rhythmic sound of their paws hitting the dirt path, the cool breeze brushing against her face, and the peaceful silence of nature made her feel connected to something greater than herself. For Sarah, this wasn't just exercise, it was therapy. After all the chaos and challenges she'd faced in her career, these quiet hours with her dogs gave her a sense of calm she couldn't find anywhere else. Titan and Luna weren't just pets or tools for work, they were family. They understood her moods, anticipated her commands, and protected her without hesitation. Years of rigorous training had turned them into machines of precision, yet they still retained their playful personalities. Titan loved chasing sticks, while Luna adored leaping into creeks to splash around. Watching them play reminded Sarah why she had chosen this life. It wasn't just about strength and skill. It was about love and trust. On this particular afternoon, the sun shone brightly overhead, casting golden rays through the trees. Birds chirped cheerfully, and the air smelled fresh and earthy. As usual, Sarah set off down the trail with Titan trotting confidently beside her and Luna bounding ahead, sniffing every bush and tree along the way. Everything seemed perfect, until they reached a bend in the trail where the peacefulness was abruptly shattered. There, parked haphazardly by the side of the road, was a group of bikers. Their motorcycles gleamed under the sunlight, but their presence felt anything but welcoming. Leather jackets, loud laughter, and an unmistakable air of arrogance made them stand out like sore thumbs in the otherwise serene environment. At first glance, they didn't seem threatening, just a bunch of rowdy men enjoying a ride. But as Sarah approached, she quickly realized that trouble might be brewing. The bikers noticed her too. One of them pointed at her and shouted something to his friends, followed by raucous laughter. Another leaned casually against his bike, smirking as he watched her approach. Sarah tightened her grip on the leashes, keeping Titan and Luna close. She knew better than to let her guard down, even in familiar surroundings. Something about the situation felt off, and she could tell her dogs sensed it too. Titan's ears perked up, and Luna stopped sniffing, her body stiffening slightly as if preparing for whatever might come next. Despite her instincts screaming caution, Sarah remained calm. She had faced far worse situations in her career, and she trusted her dogs implicitly. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was going to test not only her patience, but also the unshakable bond she shared with Titan and Luna. Little did she know, the events that would unfold in the next few minutes would leave a lasting impression, not just on her, but on everyone involved. As Sarah approached the group of bikers, their loud voices and mocking tones grew clearer. One of them, a tall man with a scruffy beard and a leather vest covered in patches, stepped forward. He was clearly the leader of the group, his stance exuding confidence, or perhaps arrogance. His sharp eyes scanned Sarah from head to toe before he sneered. Well, what do we have here? A girl out for a walk with her little pets." His words dripped with condescension, and the others erupted into laughter, as though they were watching some kind of joke unfold. Sarah didn't respond. Instead, she focused on keeping Titan and Luna calm, though she could feel their tension rising. The dogs weren't used to being laughed at or treated like ordinary animals. They were trained warriors, and every fiber of their being told them to react, but they waited for Sarah's command. Another biker, shorter but stockier, chimed in, pointing at Luna. "Look at that one. She's so scrawny. I bet she couldn't even scare a squirrel," he said, chuckling loudly. His friends joined in, making exaggerated squeaking noises to mimic rodents, which only fueled their amusement. It was clear they had no idea who, or what, they were dealing with. The leader took a step closer, narrowing the gap between himself and Sarah. "What's a pretty thing like you doing out here all alone?" he asked, his tone dripping with mockery. "Shouldn't you be somewhere safer? Maybe baking cookies or something?" Sarah clenched her jaw but kept her composure. She had faced countless challenges in her career, and she wasn't about to let a group of rude strangers rattle her. Still, their disrespect stung, not because of what they said about her, but because of how they dismissed her dogs. To her, Titan and Luna weren't just pets. They were partners, protectors, and friends who had earned respect through years of hard work and dedication. But the bikers weren't done. Another member of the group, emboldened by the leader's behavior, decided to take things further. He waved his arms wildly in front of Titan, trying to provoke him. "Come on, big guy. Show us what you've got," he taunted, leaning down slightly as if daring Titan to make a move. Titan growled softly, his deep voice rumbling like distant thunder. The biker froze for a split second, then straightened up, laughing nervously. "See, nothing but noise," he muttered, turning back to his friends. That's when things escalated. One of the bikers, seemingly drunk on bravado, lunged toward Luna, reaching out to grab her collar. His movements were clumsy and aggressive, and Sarah immediately recognized the danger. Without hesitation, she gave a sharp whistle, signaling Titan to intervene. In an instant, Titan sprang into action, positioning himself firmly between the biker and Luna. His teeth were bared, and his muscular frame blocked any attempt to get closer to Sarah or her dogs. The biker stumbled backward, his face pale with shock. For the first time, the group fell silent. Even the leader seemed taken aback by the sudden change in atmosphere, but their surprise quickly turned to defiance. "Oh yeah, so your dog's got some bite after all," the leader spat, crossing his arms over his chest. "Let's see what else they can do." Sarah's patience was wearing thin. She knew these men weren't just teasing. They were testing boundaries, pushing limits to see how far they could go. And while she wanted nothing more than to walk away and leave them behind, she also knew that ignoring their behavior might encourage them to escalate further. Her dogs were ready, their bodies tense and alert. All it would take was one word from her, and the bikers would learn exactly what it meant to cross the line. With a steady voice, Sarah issued a warning. "I suggest you back off," she said, her tone firm and unwavering. "These aren't ordinary dogs. They're highly trained military canines. You don't want to find out what they're capable of." For a moment, there was silence. The bikers exchanged glances, unsure whether to believe her. Then the leader smirked again, shaking his head. "Military dogs? Yeah, right. Prove it," he challenged, gesturing toward Titan and Luna. "Show us what they've got, sweetheart." It was a dare, and Sarah knew it. But deep down, she understood that this wasn't just about her pride. It was about teaching these men a lesson they wouldn't soon forget. With a single glance at her dogs, she signaled them to prepare. The next few moments would reveal not only the true strength of Titan and Luna, but also the unshakable bond between handler and canine. The moment Sarah gave the signal, Titan and Luna sprang into action with a precision that left the bikers stunned. Titan, his powerful frame moving like a coiled spring, lunged toward the biker, who had tried to grab Luna's collar. Before the man could even react, Titan slammed into him with controlled force, knocking him flat onto the ground. The biker let out a startled yelp, flailing his arms as he tried, and failed, to regain his footing. Titan stood over him, teeth bared in a low, menacing growl that sent chills down everyone's spines. Meanwhile, Luna darted toward another biker who had foolishly swung his helmet at her, thinking it would scare her off. In one fluid motion, she dodged the clumsy attack and clamped her jaws around the helmet with incredible strength. With a sharp tug, she yanked it out of his hands and tossed it aside like a piece of trash. The man stared at her, wide-eyed and speechless, as if he couldn't believe what had just happened. His bravado vanished instantly, replaced by sheer panic. Sarah watched silently, her expression calm but resolute. She didn't need to shout commands or intervene physically. Her dogs knew exactly what to do. Years of training had honed their instincts to perfection, and they moved with a level of coordination that seemed almost supernatural. Titan and Luna worked seamlessly together, each movement calculated and deliberate. They weren't attacking recklessly. They were demonstrating control, power, and discipline, the hallmarks of true professionals. The rest of the bikers scrambled backward, their earlier confidence crumbling under the weight of fear. One of them tripped over a rock in his haste to retreat, landing hard on his backside. Another dropped his beer can, spilling its contents as he stumbled away from the scene. Even the leader, who had been so quick to mock Sarah moments ago, looked visibly shaken. He took a hesitant step back, raising his hands in a half-hearted attempt to placate the dogs. Whoa, easy now," he stammered, his voice trembling. Despite their growing panic, the bikers still underestimated the situation. Two more of them tried to circle around Sarah, thinking they could intimidate her by surrounding her. But Titan and Luna anticipated their moves before they even made them. Luna spun around with lightning speed, cutting off one of the men mid-step. Her piercing bark echoed through the clearing, stopping him dead in his tracks. Titan mirrored her movements, blocking the other biker's path with a fierce glare that dared him to take another step closer. "You wanted proof," Sarah said finally, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "This is what happens when you disrespect someone else's work and when you threaten what matters most to them." She paused, letting her words sink in. The bikers exchanged nervous glances, realizing too late that they had crossed a line they shouldn't have. Even though Sarah wasn't shouting or raising her voice, there was an undeniable authority in her tone that demanded attention. It wasn't anger driving her. It was a quiet determination to protect herself and her dogs. These animals weren't tools or props. They were living beings who trusted her completely, and she owed it to them to stand up for their dignity. As the bikers continued to backpedal, Sarah gave another sharp whistle. This time, it wasn't a command to attack. It was a signal for Titan and Luna to hold their positions. Both dogs obeyed immediately, standing tall and unwavering as they kept the group pinned in place. Their eyes never left the bikers, tracking every twitch and movement with laser focus. It was clear they were ready to act again if necessary. But for now, they maintained their stance, exuding a quiet dominance that spoke louder than any bark or growl ever could. The leader of the group swallowed hard, beads of sweat forming on his forehead despite the cool breeze. He glanced at his companions, hoping for some kind of support, but found none. Each man was too busy trying to avoid eye contact with the dogs, or worse, imagining what might happen if they pushed things further. For the first time in years, these self-proclaimed tough guys were utterly powerless, reduced to nothing more than frightened prey in the presence of true predators. And yet Sarah didn't gloat or revel in their humiliation. She simply stood there, watching as the reality of the situation sank in. Her message was clear. Respect wasn't something to be earned through intimidation or mockery. It had to be given willingly. And if anyone failed to understand that lesson, Titan and Luna were always ready to teach it. With the bikers now frozen in place, their bravado completely shattered, Sarah stepped forward, her presence commanding despite her calm demeanor. She didn't need to raise her voice or make grand gestures. Her dogs had already done the talking for her. Titan and Luna stood like statues, their piercing eyes locked onto the group, daring anyone to move even an inch. The air was thick with tension, the kind that made every heartbeat feel louder than the last. The leader of the bikers, who only moments ago had been so quick to mock Sarah, now looked like a shadow of himself. His leather jacket and tough guy persona couldn't shield him from the reality of the situation. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously as he glanced around at his friends. None of them dared to speak. They simply stared at the ground, avoiding eye contact with both Sarah and her dogs. It was clear they had underestimated her and paid the price for it. "Let me make one thing very clear," Sarah said, her voice steady and deliberate. "These dogs aren't here for show. They're not pets you can tease or annoy without consequences. Every single day they train harder than most people will ever work in their lives. They've saved lives, protected soldiers, and faced dangers that would terrify even the strongest among us." She paused, letting her words sink in. "So when you disrespect them, or me, you're not just being rude. You're challenging something far bigger than yourselves." Her tone wasn't angry, but it carried a weight that silenced any lingering thoughts of rebellion in the bikers' minds. They shifted uncomfortably, some of them glancing longingly at their motorcycles as if hoping to escape unnoticed. But Titan and Luna weren't about to let that happen. With a low growl from Titan and a sharp bark from Luna, the group froze again, realizing they weren't going anywhere until Sarah said so. One of the bikers, the same man who had tried to swing his helmet at Luna earlier, finally mustered the courage to speak. "Look, lady, we didn't mean no harm," he stammered, his voice cracking under the pressure. "We were just messing around, you know. No big deal." Sarah raised an eyebrow, her expression unreadable. "Messing around," she echoed, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Is that what you call lunging at someone else's dog? Or laughing when others are trying to enjoy their day in peace? If this is how you treat people when you think there won't be consequences, then maybe it's time you learned a lesson." She turned her attention back to Titan and Luna, giving them a subtle nod. In response, the dogs moved closer to the bikers, their movements calculated and deliberate. Titan positioned himself directly in front of the leader, while Luna circled the group slowly, her gaze never wavering. The bikers instinctively huddled together, their bulky frames shrinking under the weight of the dog's dominance. For several long seconds, no one spoke. The only sounds were the rustling leaves overhead and the occasional nervous cough from one of the men. Finally, the leader raised his hands in surrender, his earlier arrogance completely gone. All right," he blurted out, his voice trembling. "We get it, okay? We messed up. Just call them off, please." Sarah studied him for a moment, searching his face for sincerity. Then, with a soft whistle, she signaled Titan and Luna to stand down. Both dogs obeyed immediately, retreating slightly but remaining alert. Their postures relaxed, but their eyes stayed fixed on the bikers, ready to act if needed. Sarah crossed her arms over her chest, her expression unyielding. "This isn't about punishment," she said firmly. "It's about respect. Respect for others, for boundaries, and for the fact that not everything is a game." The bikers nodded quickly, too humiliated to argue. Some of them muttered apologies under their breath, though their words lacked conviction. Sarah didn't press them further. She knew their actions, or lack thereof, would speak louder than anything they could say right now. What mattered was that they understood the gravity of their behavior and the strength of the bond between handler and canine. As the tension began to ease, Sarah knelt beside Titan and Luna, praising them softly for their impeccable performance. "Good job, my brave warriors," she murmured, scratching behind their ears. Both dogs wagged their tails proudly, their loyalty shining brighter than ever. To them, this wasn't a victory. It was simply another demonstration of the trust and teamwork they shared with Sarah. For the bikers, however, the encounter was nothing short of life-changing. They had come into the forest full of bravado. thinking they could intimidate anyone they crossed paths with. Instead, they left humbled, reminded that true strength doesn't come from loud words or reckless actions. It comes from discipline, unity, and the willingness to protect what matters most. And as Sarah watched them, the bikers' retreat was as swift as it was awkward. One by one, they stumbled toward their motorcycles, their earlier swagger replaced by hurried, clumsy movements. The leader, still trying to cling to some shred of dignity, muttered something under his breath about not being scared before swinging his leg over his bike. But even he couldn't hide the tremor in his hands as he fumbled with the ignition key. His bravado had been stripped away, leaving behind only the raw truth. They had been outmatched, not by brute force, but by skill, discipline, and unity. As the engines roared to life, the group wasted no time speeding off down the trail, kicking up dust in their wake. Their laughter was gone, replaced by tense silence as they disappeared into the distance. For Sarah, watching them leave wasn't about gloating or revenge. It was about closure. She had stood her ground, protected what mattered most, and delivered a lesson that wouldn't soon be forgotten. Still, she couldn't shake the bittersweet feeling that lingered in the air. These men hadn't set out to cause real harm. They were simply misguided, their actions fueled by arrogance and ignorance. It was a reminder of how easily people could cross lines without realizing the impact of their behavior. Once the sound of the motorcycles faded completely, Sarah turned her attention back to Titan and Luna. Both dogs were calm now, their bodies relaxed but alert. They seemed to sense that the confrontation was over, though their ears still twitched occasionally, listening for any sign of trouble. Sarah knelt beside them, running her fingers through their fur as she praised them softly. "You two are incredible," she said, her voice filled with pride. "I couldn't ask for better partners." Titan leaned into her touch, his tail thumping against the ground in contentment, while Luna nuzzled her hand affectionately. To anyone else, they might have looked like ordinary dogs enjoying a moment with their owner. But Sarah knew better. These animals weren't just companions. They were heroes in their own right, capable of feats that most people couldn't even imagine. And today, they had proven once again why they deserved nothing less than absolute respect. As the trio continued their walk along the trail, the forest seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The birds resumed their cheerful chirping, and the gentle rustle of leaves returned, as if nature itself recognized that balance had been restored. Sarah took a deep breath, savoring the tranquility. For her, this peacefulness wasn't just about the absence of conflict. It was about the harmony she shared with Titan and Luna. Every step they took together reinforced the bond they had built over years of training, trust, and mutual understanding. But as calming as the moment felt, Sarah's mind began to wander. She thought about the bikers and wondered whether they would truly learn from what had happened. Would they reflect on their actions and choose to treat others differently in the future? Or would they brush it off as bad luck, blaming their defeat on the dogs instead of acknowledging their own mistakes? It was impossible to know for sure, but Sarah hoped, perhaps naively, that the encounter had planted a seed of change within them. Her thoughts shifted to the broader implications of the incident. In a world where bullying and disrespect often went unchecked, standing up for oneself could feel daunting, especially when faced with aggression. Yet today had shown that courage didn't always mean fighting back with equal force. Sometimes it meant staying calm, trusting in your abilities, and letting your actions speak louder than words. For Sarah, the true victory wasn't in intimidating the bikers. It was in showing them that strength came in many forms, and that underestimating someone based on appearances was a mistake they wouldn't make twice. By the time they reached the edge of the forest, the sun was beginning its slow descent, casting long shadows across the path. Sarah glanced down at Titan and Luna, who trotted happily beside her, oblivious to the weight of the day's events. To them, it had been just another demonstration of teamwork, a chance to protect and support the person they loved most. For Sarah, however, it was a reminder of the responsibility that came with leadership. As a handler, she wasn't just training dogs. She was shaping their character, teaching them to act with purpose and precision. And in doing so, she was also learning valuable lessons about patience, resilience, and the power of quiet determination. As they emerged from the trees and headed back toward home, Sarah felt a renewed sense of gratitude for her dogs, for the peaceful life she had built, and for the opportunity to inspire change, even in small ways. The encounter with the bikers may have been unexpected, but it had reaffirmed something she had always believed. Respect was earned, not given freely. And sometimes, by the time Sarah and her dogs returned home, word of the encounter had already begun to spread. Small towns were like that. News traveled fast, carried by whispers at the local cafe, shared over backyard fences, or discussed in hushed tones at the grocery store. By evening, nearly everyone in town seemed to know about the woman and her remarkable dogs who had stood up to a group of rowdy bikers. The story took on a life of its own as it passed from person to person. Some versions exaggerated the details, like the number of bikers involved or how ferociously Titan and Luna had acted, but the core message remained the same. Sarah Callahan and her dogs weren't people to be messed with. For many residents, this revelation came as both a surprise and a relief. The bikers had been causing trouble for months, speeding recklessly through quiet neighborhoods, revving their engines late at night, and generally making themselves unwelcome. No one had dared confront them before, fearing retaliation or escalation. But now, thanks to Sarah's calm resolve and her dog's impressive display of skill, the town felt a little safer and a lot more inspired. The next morning, Sarah received an unexpected visit from Sheriff Daniels, a gruff but kind-hearted man who had served as the town's law enforcement officer for over 2 decades. He knocked on her door, holding his signature cowboy hat in one hand, looking almost sheepish as he greeted her. "Lieutenant Callahan," he began, tipping his hat slightly. "I heard about what happened out there yesterday. Thought I'd come by to thank you." Sarah raised an eyebrow, surprised by the gesture. "Thank me?" she asked, leaning against the doorway with Titan sitting proudly beside her and Luna peering curiously around her legs. "For what?" "For teaching those guys a lesson we've all been too scared to give them," the sheriff replied with a chuckle. "They've been terrorizing folks around here for months, parking where they shouldn't, making noise, intimidating people. We've issued warnings, but nothing stuck. Maybe now they'll think twice before stirring up trouble again." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. She hadn't set out to become some kind of local hero, but she understood the importance of standing up to bullies, whether on a battlefield or in everyday life. "It wasn't about teaching them a lesson," she said after a moment. "It was about showing them that respect isn't optional. If they can learn that, then maybe things will change for the better." The sheriff smiled warmly. "Well, whatever your intentions, you've earned yourself a lot of fans around here. Folks are talking about how brave you were and how incredible your dogs are. You've given us hope that we don't have to put up with nonsense just because someone thinks they're untouchable." After the sheriff left, Sarah couldn't help but reflect on his words. She knew that fear often kept people silent, even when faced with injustice. It wasn't easy to speak up or take action, especially when the odds seemed stacked against you. But sometimes, all it took was one person, or in her case, one team, to break the cycle. Her dogs hadn't attacked recklessly. They had responded with precision and control, proving that true strength lay not in aggression, but in discipline and purpose. Word of the incident continued to ripple through the community throughout the week. Neighbors stopped Sarah on her daily walks, thanking her for standing up to the bikers and marveling at Titan and Luna's abilities. Some even joked about hiring her dogs as personal bodyguards. At first, Sarah found the attention overwhelming, but she soon realized it wasn't just about her. It was about the message her actions had sent. People saw that courage didn't require loud declarations or flashy displays. Sometimes, it simply meant doing what was right, no matter how daunting the situation might seem. Even the local news station picked up the story, running a brief segment about the hero K9 handler who had humbled a gang of troublemakers. Sarah declined interviews, preferring to let the dogs do the talking. After all, it wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about inspiring others to stand strong in the face of adversity. As the days passed, Sarah noticed a subtle shift in the town's atmosphere. People seemed friendlier, more willing to greet her when she walked by with Titan and Luna. Children waved excitedly, calling out the dogs' names, while adults exchanged knowing smiles. There was a newfound sense of unity, as if the entire community had rallied behind her quiet act of bravery. And as for the bikers, they kept their distance, avoiding areas where Sarah might appear. Rumor had it they were laying low, nursing their wounded egos, and perhaps rethinking their behavior. Whether they truly learned their lesson remained to be seen, but one thing was certain. Sarah and her dogs had made an impact that wouldn't easily fade. In the weeks that followed, life in the small town began to change in subtle but meaningful ways. The encounter between Sarah, Titan, Luna, and the bikers became a story everyone talked about, a tale of courage, respect, and justice served without violence. It wasn't just gossip, it was a lesson wrapped in action, one that resonated deeply with people from all walks of life. For many residents, Sarah's stand against the bikers was more than an isolated incident. It was a spark that ignited something bigger. The once intimidating group of bikers had vanished from the streets. Their loud motorcycles no longer disturbed the peace, and their swaggering presence was nowhere to be seen. Whether they had left town altogether or simply decided to lay low remained unclear, but what mattered most was the relief it brought to the community. Parents felt safer letting their children play outside. Shopkeepers could close up their stores without worrying about rowdy behavior, and elderly neighbors no longer flinched at the sound of roaring engines late at night. The town breathed easier, and Sarah's name often came up whenever someone mentioned why. But the impact went beyond just the absence of the bikers. People started carrying themselves differently, as if a weight had been lifted off their shoulders. Strangers greeted each other more warmly on the street, exchanging smiles and nods where before there might have been only cautious silence. Conversations grew livelier, filled with stories of admiration for Sarah and her dogs. "Did you hear how calm she stayed?" one person would say. "And those dogs, they didn't even bark until it was time. They just knew exactly what to do," another would add. The pride in their voices was unmistakable, as though Sarah's actions had given them permission to believe in their own strength. For Sarah, this newfound attention was both heartwarming and humbling. She hadn't sought recognition, yet she found herself embraced by a community that now saw her not just as a neighbor, but as a symbol of resilience. Children especially adored Titan and Luna, pointing excitedly whenever they spotted the pair during their daily runs. "Look, Mommy, it's the hero dogs," they'd shout, waving enthusiastically. Sarah couldn't help but smile at their innocence and their boundless energy. To these kids, Titan and Luna weren't just animals. They were larger-than-life figures who represented bravery and teamwork. One afternoon, while walking through the park, Sarah was approached by a young boy named Ethan, who clutched a stuffed German Shepherd toy tightly in his arms. His wide eyes shone with awe as he asked hesitantly, "Are these your dogs? The ones who scared away the bad guys?" Sarah knelt down to his level, nodding with a gentle smile. "Yes, they are," she replied. "This is Titan, and this is Luna. They're my best friends." Ethan's face lit up. "Can I pet them?" he asked eagerly. With a nod from Sarah, Titan and Luna sat patiently as the boy reached out to stroke their fur. "They're so cool," Ethan whispered reverently. Then, after a pause, he added, "I want to be brave like you when I grow up." Sarah felt a lump rise in her throat. It wasn't just the sweetness of the moment. It was the realization that her actions had planted seeds of inspiration in places she hadn't expected. This little boy, inspired by her and her dogs, might carry that lesson forward into his own life. And perhaps others would too, whether it was standing up for themselves, treating others with kindness, or simply believing that even ordinary people could do extraordinary things. As days turned into weeks, Sarah noticed other changes as well. Neighbors began organizing community events, inviting her and her dogs to attend. At first, she declined politely, preferring to keep a low profile. But eventually, she agreed to join a local fundraiser for the animal shelter, where Titan and Luna demonstrated some of their training skills. The crowd erupted in applause, cheering not just for their abilities, but for the bond they shared with Sarah. It was clear that the trio had become a source of unity and hope for the town. Even Sheriff Daniel stopped by occasionally, updating Sarah on the biker situation. Still no sign of him, he reported cheerfully one day. Maybe they finally got the message. He paused, then added with a grin, or maybe they're scared of running into your four-legged enforcers again. Sarah laughed softly, scratching behind Titan's ears. Let's hope they remember this lesson for a long time, she said. Though the memory of the confrontation lingered, it didn't weigh heavily on her anymore. Instead, she saw it as a reminder of the power of standing firm, not just for oneself, but for the greater good. By fostering respect and inspiring courage, Sarah and her dogs had done more than teach a group of troublemakers a lesson. They had reminded an entire town of its strength. As the weeks turned into months, the story of Sarah Callahan and her heroic dogs became a cherished part of the town's identity. It wasn't just a tale people told. It was a reminder of what could be achieved when courage met discipline, and when respect was demanded rather than given freely. The incident with the bikers had faded from daily conversation, but its impact lingered like the faint scent of rain after a storm. Life in the town felt lighter, safer, and more connected, as though Sarah's actions had stitched together threads of unity that had long been frayed. For Sarah, life returned to its familiar rhythm. Her days were filled with training runs through the forest trails, obedience drills in the backyard, and quiet moments spent bonding with Titan and Luna. To outsiders, it might have seemed like nothing had changed. She still lived simply, worked hard, and cared deeply for her dogs. But inside, she carried a renewed sense of purpose. The encounter with the bikers had reminded her of why she loved her work so much. It wasn't just about teaching dogs to follow commands. It was about building trust, fostering teamwork, and creating something extraordinary out of ordinary beginnings. Titan and Luna thrived under her care, their loyalty unwavering and their instincts sharper than ever. They continued to amaze everyone they met, whether it was during community events or casual walks around town. Children begged their parents to let them meet the hero dogs, while adults marveled at how calm and intelligent they were. Sarah often joked that she needed to start charging admission fees, but in truth, she enjoyed sharing her passion with others. Watching people light up when they interacted with Titan and Luna brought her immense joy. It was proof that even the simplest connections could leave lasting impressions. The bikers never returned, at least not to cause trouble. Rumors circulated that they had moved on to another town, though no one knew for sure. What mattered most was that their absence allowed the community to heal and grow stronger. People who had once avoided certain areas now ventured there without hesitation, reclaiming spaces that had once felt unsafe. The forest trails where Sarah took her daily runs buzzed with activity again. Families picnicking, joggers stretching their legs, and hikers exploring hidden paths. It was as if the town itself had taken a deep breath and exhaled, releasing years of pent-up tension. Sarah occasionally thought about the bikers and wondered if they truly understood the lesson they had been taught. Had they learned to treat others with respect? Or had they simply decided to pick on easier targets elsewhere? She hoped it was the former, but she knew she might never find out. What she did know was that their actions, or lack thereof, spoke volumes. By choosing to stay away, they had unknowingly reinforced the very lesson they had tried to ignore. Strength lies not in intimidation, but in earning respect. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves danced in the breeze, Sarah stood at the edge of the forest trail with Titan and Luna by her side. She gazed out at the horizon, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude. This town, these people, and especially her dogs, they were her family now. Together, They had faced challenges and emerged stronger, proving that even the smallest acts of bravery could ripple outward, touching lives in ways no one anticipated. As she began her run, Titan bounding ahead and Luna trotting close beside her, Sarah reflected on how far she had come. From her days in the military to her quiet life in this small town, every step of her journey had led her here, to a place where she could make a difference, however small, in the lives of those around her. And as the sun rose higher in the sky, casting its warm glow over the world below, she knew one thing for certain. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she and her dogs would face them together, with courage, determination, and an unbreakable bond that nothing could shake. The story of Sarah Callahan and her remarkable dogs wasn't just about standing up to bullies or earning respect. It was about finding strength in unity, inspiring others to believe in themselves, and proving that even in the face of adversity, there was always hope. For Sarah, Titan, and Luna, it was a new beginning, one filled with endless possibilities and the promise of brighter days ahead.